Hello my friend, I'm Hector Perez. I'm glad that you have been encouraged to take this free course to create your first application created with Xamarin Forms. And the purpose of this mini course is that in an easy and fast way you can create your first application based on Xamarin Forms, so you can see that it is not so difficult, and that you can create a cross-platform application in just a few minutes. This application that we see on the screen is the application that we are going to build. As you can see, it is a simple application, but it looks extremely good. It looks very good graphically, and we have achieved this thanks to features that are native to Xamarin Forms. This is an application that calculates your body mass index. Here, we can enter a height, say 180, and we can enter a weight of a person. Then, based on this data that we have entered in these two text boxes, we will be able to press the button that says calculate, and this will give us a message telling us if our body mass index is correct, that is, if we are healthy or unhealthy. The application shows us here the body mass index in number format. And based on this result we display a message telling us whether we are healthy or not. And this is an application that seems very simple, but you could upload it to the app stores with some modifications that you make to it, and you could start generating revenue through advertising. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We are going to go step by step and we are going to make it as simple as we can, so you don't feel overwhelmed, and so you can see that mobile development is not as complicated as some people think. I make this course thinking that you already have Visual Studio installed, because the course is intended to be something 100% practical. Likewise, if you don't have it installed yet as part of the resources in this video, I'm going to leave a video for you to see how to perform the installation of Xamarin Forms with Visual Studio 2019. Okay. So, once we have initialized Visual Studio 2019, we are going to see a screen like the one we see here, where we have different options to work with projects of any kind. In our case we are interested in working with a project based on Xamarin Form, therefore, we are going to indicate that we want to create a new project, and in this search bar we are going to enter the term, without pressing enter, Xamarin Forms. Okay, automatically, it is carried out the application of a filter, of all the templates of types of projects that we can work with this term in Visual Studio. We are interested in a certain type of project, let's look for it called Mobile App Xamarin Forms. This is the template that we are interested in. We are going to click on Next. We are going to put a name to this project, as for example IMC Calculator. We are going to click on Create and this is going to display this new window where we have other Xamarin Forms sub-templates that we can choose if we want to simplify a little the work that we are going to do. In our case, we are going to indicate that we want a blank template, and we are going to select the Android and iOS platforms. Once this is done, we click OK, and this starts the creation of our project. Let's give it a few seconds while the creation of this project takes place. Okay, after waiting a few seconds, our project has been successfully created. Here we have it in this tab that says Solution Explorer. Let's click on this icon to keep the Explorer as part of Visual Studio, and we see that we have here different projects. Each one of them is for one thing. For example, this project that doesn't have a dot and something, that is, it just says IMC Calculator, is the project where you are going to share the business logic and also the graphical interface. You also have the Android project, where you have all the information you need to deploy an Android-based application. And we also have this iOS project which basically has the information to deploy the project on the iOS platform. It is in our case, we are not going to touch these projects, however we are going to leave them here, as they are necessary to work with Xamarin Forms. We are going to work directly with this project that says IMC Calculator. Don't worry if clicking on this project opens a tab, you can easily close it. Let's expand this project by clicking on this triangle that appears here. And if we look, we have different files that have been pre-created for us, and the file that we are interested in as part of this project is this one called mainpage.xaml. If we click on that triangle, we see that we have here a file mainpage.xaml.cs. And to make things simple for you, mainpage.xaml is where we write the graphical part of the application and mainpage.xaml.cs is where we write the logical part, or the code to carry out different actions of the application. So, in this video we are going to focus on creating the graphical interface of the application. In this file mainpage.xaml. This that we see here is called XAML language, and if you have worked with HTML, for example before, surely you are going to be familiar with this type of language based on tags. In our case, these tags represent something different. For example, content page makes a reference to the type of page that we are going to use as part of the application, content page. If you notice, the content page is the main container, and inside this content page we have a stack layout, which is a type of container inside the page that we have here. Content page is a type of page, stack layout is a type of layout or container of controls, and inside this container of controls, we have specifically a control called label. And this label has at the same time many properties that we can configure. For example, what is the text of this label? In this case it is welcome to Xamarin Forms. We have the horizontal property options, which in this case is specified with center. We have the vertical options property, which tells us to center this label and expand it. Let's see what this looks like in an emulator. Okay, after waiting a few seconds while the compilation and deployment of the application takes place, we see our application running on the Android-based emulator, and we have basically a label element, which says, Welcome to Xamarin Forms. Okay, that's what we have specified as part of this label element. Thanks to updates to Xamarin Forms, today, we have something called Xamarin Hot Reload, which basically allows us to make changes to this code that we see here, and this is going to be reflected immediately in our running application. For example, suppose we change this text property, so that it says instead of Welcome to Xamarin Forms, Hello Xamarin Forms. If we save the changes, immediately, the GUI is updated to show the change we applied. This is quite useful for creating graphical interfaces. In our case, we are going to use it to create our BMI application GUI. So, what we're going to proceed to do is, we're going to change the text of this label element, so that it says instead of Hello Xamarin Forms, calculate your BMI, which is body mass index. We are going to remove these properties that are specified here of horizontal options and vertical options. If we save the changes and see the preview, our label already appears at the top. As we want to display the information in the center of our screen, we are going to go to the properties of this stack layout, and we are going to indicate vertical options equal to center, and also horizontal options equal to center. We save the changes, and as we can see, we already have again this label in the center, with the difference that we are already applying this positioning at layout level, that is to say, all the controls that belong to the stack layout are going to be automatically centered. This type stack layout, as its name says, is a layout that allows us to stack elements. So imagine in the real world we have a stack of plates. You can place more plates, for example, one on top of the other, and you will create a column of different plates. Something similar can be done with this stack layout. We are going to be able to stack one element on top of another. And in this case, we are going to indicate that under this element label, we want an element that is called entry. This control entry is going to allow us to enter information to the application. If we close this label and save the changes, notice that we already have an entry element, which allows us to enter text as part of the application. However, we do not know what this element refers to. Therefore, we can use a property called Placeholder, which allows us to specify a content, or a help to the user about what information to enter. In this case we are going to indicate that we want to enter the height. We save the changes, and already we have here the label, and we have the control entry that indicates us that we can enter a height. Okay, here we can enter any data. Later we are going to write again in our XAML file. What do we want? Another entry element, but that this time, its placeholder is weight. To calculate the body mass index, you need precisely the height and weight of a person. Let's also write again that we want an entry element. And this entry element is to display the information of the calculation that we perform. So, we are going to indicate between placeholder UBMI. Okay. We are going to open our application, and we already have the 3 entry elements. Finally, let's indicate that we need a button element, which will allow us to click or tap on this button to perform a certain task. We are going to indicate then that the text of this button says, calculate. Remember to close the labels, save the changes, and we have the label here. We have the 3 elements entered, and we have our button to perform the calculation of the body mass index. In the next lesson, we are going to see how to perform the body mass index calculation, getting the information from our GUI form. This is in the next lesson. Hello, what's up my friend? I'm Hector Perez. Welcome to this second lesson of our course. Create your first application in Xamarin Forms. In this lesson, we are going to see how we can get information from our GUI to perform some kind of processing. In this case, the calculation of the body mass index from the height and weight of a person. To perform this action, let's go back to Visual Studio, and as part of our button, we have here a property or an event that is called clicked. We are going to choose this event, and if you notice, we have as part of Visual Studio, a help that allows us to create something called an event handler. We are going to double-click on this option, and this has automatically created an event handler for us. An event handler is the code that will allow us to perform a certain action when we tap or click on this button that we see here. And if you wonder, where is this event handler? Well, if we go to mainpage.xaml.cs, we can see that we have here created this piece of code that was not there before. And basically it is here where we are going to write our logic to carry out certain actions. The first thing that we are going to do is to obtain the height of our form, and to be able to communicate from this file to our GUI file that we see here, we must assign a name to the elements that we want to access from this piece of code. So, to assign a name to our controls, we're going to go to the control, and we're going to type x:name. We're going to call this control height. Similarly, we're going to go to our second entry and we're going to indicate that we want to assign a name called weight. We are also going to go to our third entry. Let's give it a name, for example BMI. We are going to save the changes. And we're going to go back to the code behind, which is this file that we see here. We're going to first retrieve the height of a person. We are going to declare a variable called height, which is equal to _parse, and in parentheses, height. As you can see, we already have access to our control, and we can already access its properties. The property that interests us in this case is the text that we have in that text box. We are also going to obtain the weight of the person through var weight equal to _parse between brackets peso.text. With this, what we are going to achieve is to convert the text in a double data type. And once we have this data, we can carry out the operation to obtain the body mass index. We are going to declare then a variable called BMI, which is equal to, and the formula to obtain the body mass index is the weight over the height squared. Therefore, we are going to indicate weight between, and in parentheses, height times height, semicolon. We already have then the body mass index. Therefore, we can assign it directly to our control in its text property. Then, bmi.text is equal to .toString. Why do we do this that we see here? Well, it's because BMI, it's a double data type. And so that we can assign it to the property text, which is of type string, we have to carry out the conversion of the data type double to the data type string. And we do this with this .toString. Let's test the application to see that this works correctly. We launch the application, we wait a few seconds while it starts or installs the application on the device, and we are going to test it. Let's imagine that we are 1.60 tall, and we have a weight of 70 kilos. We click on the calculate button, and here we get the body mass index calculation. Let's stop the application. And the next thing we are going to do is to perform an analysis to see if the person is underweight, if the weight is normal, if the person is overweight or obese. We are going to declare then a variable that is called result that is empty. This is for the purpose of assigning a value to display later. And let's ask if body mass index is less than 18.5, then the result is equal to you are underweight. That is, if the body weight index of a person is less than 18.5, which was the number we saw as part of the result of the calculation, then this person is underweight. Let's do an if to ask if the BMI is greater than or equal to 18.5, but is also less than or equal to 24.9, then the result is equal to, your weight is normal. We place the semicolon. Let's create another else if. In fact, I can copy this line, and let's indicate. If BMI is greater than or equal to 25 and BMI is less than or equal to 29.9, then the person is overweight. And finally we will indicate with an else, result is equal to you have obesity. And let's send a message to the person. Take care of yourself, so that it is something a little more personal. Then, already after we place all these conditionals, at the end we are going to indicate display alert, and this method of display alert is going to serve us to display a message to the user. It receives 3 parameters, a title, a message, and a button to remove the message that appears. Then, as title we can indicate result, we place a comma to pass the second parameter, which will be the string that we fill with each of the results. And finally, we are going to indicate that the button says OK. With this that we have done, with this logic that we have implemented, we are going to see how our application works. Okay, let's assume that the person is 1.50 tall but weighs 70 kilos. If we press calculate, we see that it indicates that the person has obesity, since he is very small and his weight is very large. However, if we put that he is 1.80 meters tall, and click on Calculate, we see that the result is that the weight is normal for this person. If, for example, the person were 2 meters and 10 centimeters tall and weighed 70 kilos, then your result would be, you are underweight. With this we can verify that the application is already working correctly. However, if we try to enter a text string here, which we can do, since this keyboard is displayed, let's see what happens. We see that Visual Studio marks us an exception. How can we avoid this type of exceptions? Well, we are going to see this in the next lesson. Hello friends, I'm Hector Perez. Welcome to the third lesson of the course, Create Your First Application with Xamarin Forms. In this lesson, we are going to focus on preventing the user from entering information that does not correspond to the operation of our application. And we know that users always manage to enter wrong information, or information that breaks the systems. So, the convenient thing to do is to try to prevent users from entering information that does not correspond or is not valid. As part of our application, we are going to perform certain actions. First of all, we are going to go to the XAML file to try to prevent as much as possible this type of problems. The first thing that we are going to do is to indicate that this element entry, or where we can enter information, only receives numbers. We have a property called keyboard, which has different options, or different values that we can assign. In our case, we are interested in assigning a numeric type, since it is the only type of data that we want to enter to these entries. We are going to go to the second entry, and we are going to indicate that we also want a numeric type keyboard. We start the application to see how this change we have made looks like. If we position ourselves over the entry called height, we can see that we no longer have the keyboard that we had before, and we can only enter numbers. Another thing that we have to validate is that this entry that we have here must be read-only, because here we can enter text, we can enter numbers, and this entry is supposed to work only to explain the result of the calculation. So, we go back to Visual Studio. And in this entry that says UBMI, we are going to indicate isEnabled is equal to false. This in order to make it read-only. If we launch the application again, we can see that we can no longer select this entry, and therefore, we cannot modify its information. It seems that the application is ready. However, see what happens if we do not enter any data in the entry control, and we click on Calculate. We have an error in Visual Studio, and this is because it is trying to carry out the obtaining of a double type number, when in fact we have an empty string. We are going to correct also this problem. Immediately after this key that we see here, we are going to ask, yes, no, string.is, null or empty, to validate that we do not have an empty text box, and in parentheses, we are going to enter what the string is, which in this case is height.text. After this first closing parenthesis, we're going to place a conditional and then, not string.is null or empty. I'm going to put this on a new line, and in the parentheses, weight.text. Okay, with this, what I'm going to do is check, is that the height and weight text boxes are not empty, and if these two text boxes are not empty, then you can perform this whole series of operations. Therefore, I cut this code that we had here, and I paste it inside the if. Okay, we already have this ready. I am going to compress this if to create an else. That is to say, in the event that there is one of the two empty text boxes, or that both text boxes are empty. And what I am going to do in this case, is to show a display alert, and in brackets, erroneous data. Comma, as a message, please fill in all the information. And as the last parameter, which is the message to remove the alert, I'm going to put OK, semicolon. We have this ready. Let's test it in the emulator. Okay, let's test our application. We click on Calculate, and notice that I already get a message here that says that the data is wrong. If I enter the value of a single text box, and I click on Calculate, again I get this warning that I have not filled all the information in my form. With this then, we can prevent different actions of the users, so that they do not enter information that does not correspond, or leave empty the text boxes that do have to carry information. In the next lesson we are going to focus on improving the graphical interface of our application. Hi, I'm Hector Perez. Welcome to the last lesson of this mini course. Create your first application with Xamarin Forms. In this lesson we are going to focus on improving the design of our graphical application. And you will see how easy it is to improve that ugly application we have, in an application that has a nice interface. To carry out this task, we are going to install a Nugget package, which has been developed by Microsoft itself. To carry out this action, we are going to click on the Explorer of Solutions. Right-click on the solution. On the solution, not on the project, right-click, Manage Nugget Packages, for the solution. And in this tab that opens, we are going to click on this option that says Browse, and we are going to look for a package that is called Visual Material. Okay, here we have this package. This package we have to install it only in the Android project, and in the iOS project. Let's install it. We accept the license terms. And as an important step, before we proceed, let's go to this section that says Installed. We remove this filter. And let's look for the package called Xamarin Forms. As you can see, the package that I had installed, or the version of the package that I have installed is version 4.3. And if we try to use the package that we have installed from Visual Material, it's going to cause us problems. Therefore, we are going to upgrade to the most recent version, which in my case is version 4.5. For this case, we do have to select all the projects. Make sure they have a check mark, All Projects, and click on Install to the latest stable version. Okay, if we select this package again, we see that we already have the latest version installed for each of the projects. We can now close this window. And in order to use the package that we have installed, we have to make a small configuration in each of the projects, both Android and iOS. So, watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to click on the triangle in the Android project, and I'm going to open a file that's called mainactivity.cs. Here I'm going to look for this line that's called xamarinforms.forms.init. And after this line, I'm going to write something similar to what I have up here. That is, global : xamarin.forms.forms, material.init, and in parentheses. I'm going to pass the parameters this, comma, saved instance state, which are the same in the above. Adding this line, we can now save the changes and close this tab. Now let's go to the iOS-based project. We are going to deploy the project, and we are going to open the file called appdelegate.cs. We're going to again look for the line that's called xamarin.forms.forms.init. And after this line we are going to type global : xamarin.forms.forms, material.init. We place the parentheses, and here, in the case of iOS, we don't have to pass any parameters as part of our application. Save the changes, we close this tab. And with these changes that we have made we can return to our page of graphical interface mainpage.xaml, and if we go to the top, we can specify as part of our content page, in one of its properties, a property that is called visual, which is equal to material. With these small changes that we have made, notice what happens if we launch the application. Okay, we already have our application more Xamarin Forms, and as you can see, we already have a better GUI design. We no longer have those old-fashioned text boxes that we saw previously. We can already see that if we hover over one of the text boxes, the placeholder goes to the top, and in conclusion, we already have a better design. Let's improve it even more. The first thing we are going to do is to enlarge the size of this container, so that it occupies more space, since it looks too small. So let's go back to Visual Studio. And as part of this stack layout, which is the container for the controls, we are going to specify a property called width request, which is basically a property that allows us to specify the width of the control. We are going to set it to a value of 250. We save the changes and this already looks much better. Also, we will modify this label that we have here, so that it displays a better message about the purpose of this application. We return to Visual Studio. We find the label that we are interested in, which is this one that we see here, and we are going to modify some properties, such as font attributes, equal to bold. This is to convert the font of this label to bold. We specify a font size equal to 50 units. We are also going to center the content of this label. Therefore, we write horizontal text alignment, equal to center. And finally, let's specify a color. Through text color, equal to hash, and the values 565,168. We save the changes. Okay, we already have a better appearance. Finally, let's modify the color of this button that we see here. We return then to Visual Studio. Let's go to our element called button, and we're going to indicate background color, equal to, and we have a value called dark magenta. We save the changes. And as you can see, we already have our graphical interface redesigned with a better appearance, and it is definitely 100% functional. With this we have finished our course on creating your first Xamarin Forms-based application. If this has been done in less than an hour, imagine all that you will be able to do once you take one of my complete courses, which are part of my academy. If you want more information about them, feel free to write me or contact me by any of the means you see on the website. What are you waiting for to create cross-platform applications with Xamarin Forms? See you in the courses.